Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Yoma, Perek Beis, Chapter 2, Mishna Hey, Mishna 5. Okay. Tamid, Karei Batisha. Tamid means the morning, the daily sacrifice. We know there is a daily burnt offering, a daily olah, a communal sacrifice that was brought every day, once in the morning, one in the afternoon. So Tamid Karei Batisha. The carbon Tamid, the daily sacrifice, is offered with 9 Kohanim, Ba'asara, or sometimes with 10, Ba'chadasar, sometimes with 11, B'shnei Marsar, sometimes with 12, Lo'ipachas v'lo yoiser, not less and not more. Now, this number is starting from the point of when the limbs of the sacrifice are brought onto the ramp. There were a couple of things before that. There was a person who slaughtered, person who sprinkled the blood, a person who cleaned out the ash from the inner altar, who cleaned out the ash from the menorah. We're not talking about that. We're talking about starting from when the limbs were put onto the ramp. So now the Mishna is going to go through Ketzad. How is this? How does this work out? That sometimes you have 9, 10, etc. Atzmai B'tisha. The actual Karmet Tabit itself needs 9. Needs 9 Kohanim. I lost the place. Ketzad. Atzmai B'tisha. The carbon Tamid itself needs 9. Okay. So what were the 9, which we actually learned previously? So just going to read to you here from the art scroll. The Tamid itself was offered by 9 Kohanim. 6 carried the parts of the animal, right? There were 6 parts that were carried by Kohanim. 1 carried the chavitin. 1 carried the meal offering that was for the Kohen Gadol, that the Kohen Gadol brought every day, that was brought for the Kohen Gadol every day. 1 the mincha, and 1 the wine. Okay, that is the base number of Kohanim each morning. On a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday, and all these days, how many Kohanim were involved in the carbon Tamid? Again, starting from the point of taking the limbs to the ramp, we have 9. Okay, B'chag, when it's Sukkos, okay, when it's Chol Hamoed Sukkos, B'yad echad tzroicha shamayim, you need 1 more Kohen to carry the flask of water, because on Chol Hamoed Sukkos, besides having the Nisach HaYayin, besides having the wine libation that's poured every day by a carbon Tamid, while that was being poured, they also had a water libation, a pouring of water at the same time. So you needed another Kohen to bring up that flask of water. Hare Kanasara, that gives you 10. Okay? Next, Bein Arabayim. When it came to the daily sacrifice in the afternoon, in the evening, Ba'chadasar, then you had 11 Kohanim involved. How's that? Hu Atzma B'tisha. The carbon Tamid itself needs 9. The 9, as we said before. Right? The 9, as we said before. And then you have Ushnayim and 2 more. The Yadim Mishnei Gezirei Eitzim, in their hands were 2 blocks of wood. 2 blocks of wood were added to the fire every afternoon. Meaning when they brought the carbon Tamid, Shalben Rabayim, when they brought the afternoon daily sacrifice, so of course they had the parts of, they had all the parts of the carbon Tamid that have to be brought, and all the meal offerings and the wine libation that has to go along. But another thing that went along with that afternoon daily sacrifice were 2 blocks of wood that were added to the fire. There's a mitzvah to do, to add 2 blocks of wood on the fire. And therefore, if we're saying so therefore we say that in the afternoon, there were 11 of them. Okay? There were 11. Now, where these 2 blocks of wood, we're mentioning here that they brought in the afternoon. Were there any blocks of wood brought in the morning? Yes, there were. The Torah says you bring blocks of wood, you add blocks of wood every morning and every afternoon. But we're not mentioning the Kohen who added the blocks in that morning, because as we said before, our counting starts from when the limbs were brought to the ramp. So in the morning, those 2 blocks were put on before the limbs were brought to the ramp. In the afternoon, the limbs were brought to the ramp, and then the 2 blocks of wood were brought also. So therefore, just the way it works out when it happened, that makes a difference as to whether we count them or not in this calculation that we're making of how many Kohanim were involved. So in the afternoon, where Let me just read. The blocks for the afternoon Tamid, however, are included because these blocks were placed on the ramp after the limbs of the afternoon Tamid were placed there. So they are they come after that, and therefore they are included. So what bothers me about this is that, okay, so fine. We don't include them in this calculation because we're starting from when the limbs were brought in the morning. We're talking about when the limbs were brought in the morning. When the limbs were brought to the ramp, right? And from that point on is when we're counting. All right. So the morning ones were the morning blocks were added before that. So they're not counted here. Fine. But they're not mentioned in the previous Mishnah either. When the Mishnah spoke about the slaughtering and the throwing of the blood and the cleaning out of the ash from the altar and from the menorah, there's no mention about those blocks of wood. Who did that? And was that included in any of the lottery? It just bothers me. I don't know why there's no mention of it in if it's mentioned. So fine, you can't calculate it here in this counting. But why is no mention of it before when we talked about the other parts of the service? So that's my question. I don't have an answer. All right, next. Uba Shabbos, on Shabbos, Ba'achadasar, you had 11 also. Why is that? Who asked Batisha? The actual carbon tamid had 9. Ushnayim biyadam, and then you had 2 more kohanim that in their hands were Shnei bazicha levona, 2 ladles of levona. Levona is translated as frankincense. Okay, you know what frankincense is? Frankincense is the sap of a certain tree, they say down here. Okay, so this frankincense there were 2 ladles of frankincense that went together with the lechem apanim that were put down that were down on the altar and eventually eventually offered. Now, what this means is like this: we know that in the Beis Hamikdash there was the shulchan, the table. The table had the lechem apanim, 12 loaves of special bread. Those breads, the new breads, were put on Shabbos, and together you had to the bread. So every Shabbos, old breads were taken off, new breads were put on. When the new breads were put on, there were 2 new ladles of frankincense that were also put on the table. Now, when the old breads were removed, so the old breads were given to the Kohanim. They split it amongst the Kohanim. The 2 ladles of frankincense were offered on the Mizbeach, offered on the altar. So therefore, on Shabbos, you have to have 2 Kohanim that actually put the 2 ladles of frankincense on the kevesh, on the ramp, before they were brought to the altar. That's why you have 11 on Shabbos. Now, what if it's Shabbos in the middle of Sukkot? So then, biyad echad sleicha shamayim. So you had the 9 that had to bring the parts of the actual that came along with the carbon tamid itself. The 9 took care of the carbon tamid itself. 2 took care of the ladles of levina, the frankincense, and 1 person had to have the flask of water, because the flask of water was poured on Shabbos Cholamoid also. Meaning the Nisach the pouring of the water, was done that when the carbon tamid of the morning was, when the wine was poured on the Mizbeach while the carbon tamid is being offered, when it was Shabbos Cholamoid Sukkos, Shabbos during Sukkos, you then had poured the water also. So in Shabbos, you needed 3 extra people, 2 to be able to carry the frankincense and 1 to carry the water. And that's how we come out to the number 12. So that's how we said, no less than 9, no more than 12. One last point. Now, yesterday we discussed how the 4th lottery that was mentioned in the previous Mishnah was who is going to bring the limbs from the ramp to the altar. It was a separate lottery. So even though you had 6 bringing them up to the ramp, you had a 4th lottery for Rashi said 1 person to bring them all up to the fire, right? That means you really need how many for the daily sacrifice? You need 7. Yeah. You need 7. You need 6 to bring it to the ramp, and a 7th to go ahead and bring it up to the fire. No mention of that 7th person here, because according to this Mishnah disagrees with the previous Mishnah. Yeah. This Mishnah holds that the same people who brought it to the ramp are the people who put it up and bring it to the top of the altar and put it on the fire. It's the same people. So therefore, the number is the same. But according to the previous Mishnah, you have an extra person. What bothers me, and I say bothers me, but just the point I want to make, is the previous Mishnah said because of that 7th person, there was a 4th lottery. Now, if there is no seventh person according to this Mishnah, then there's no fourth lottery. So when the Mishnah said before there are 4 lotteries, it's really an argument. According to that Mishnah, there's 4. According to this Mishnah, there's 3. Something to think about. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Nothing good.